So in a moment, I'm going to hand things over to Josh Folk, who's head of our government solutions over there, and he'll be introducing us to the IdeaScale API and some of its uses. He's going to speak to you for about the next 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to allow about 10 minutes at the end for questions. But I'll be monitoring the questions field as we go so that if you have questions and there's a moment to stop, we'll go ahead and take that moment. And obviously, what we're looking at is sort of an introduction to the range of possibilities presented by the IdeaScale API. But we do have some of our tech people on the line who might be able to help with some maybe shorter, more specific questions. But if you have some in-depth questions, we are glad to answer them for you. You can just go ahead and contact us after the webinar is over. We also are recording this webinar, so it will be available to everyone afterwards. They can access it when the event is over. We'll send out notice in your email. And of course, if you have any other questions about IdeaScale, we're glad to answer them too. In the meantime, I'm going to hand things over to Josh Folk. Let me just get him set up as the presenter here. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Josh.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jessica. Can you hear me?
I hear you great.
Okay, and you should be able to see my screen as well.
Yep, looks good.
Always have to make sure, you just never know. All right, well, thank you again, Jessica, and welcome. Everyone that is joining this morning or this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you're at in this world. Look, I am very happy today to introduce, as Jessica was saying, IdeaScale, or basically an introduction of what an API is, as well as how you might be able to use the IdeaScale API. Okay, so the first thing here is you don't need to be scared about APIs. I don't know, obviously, the level of education or level of familiarity with APIs from those on the webinar. So again, some of this might be a little basic, but you should actually know that APIs are all around us today. So for example, if you have an Instagram account, okay, you're probably familiar with this screenshot right here. And the ability to take a Instagram and share it as well on your Facebook account is a very simple example of Instagram using the Facebook API to enable that functionality. Okay, another example, I'm guessing that most of you have a Twitter account. And so if so, this will look familiar to you. And of course, you know about the option to post any one of your tweets onto your Facebook at the same time. And this is where you would do that. And of course, this functionality is made possible because of, you guessed it, an API. Another example, which you've probably have seen, is if you have a LinkedIn profile, people can upload using a program called SlideShare presentation. Okay, and that's sort of embedded right into your LinkedIn stream, and as a member or a user of LinkedIn, you can scroll through the presentation as you can see the arrow here, right within your LinkedIn, which makes it a very easy and seamless experience. So again, that type of functionality is made possible by SlideShare using their API to build out this widget essentially that people can use within LinkedIn. Okay, so these APIs are all around us today, and what they do is they specify how software components, software such as Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, so these major web services that we're talking about here, basically how they should interact with each other. And if you think about it on a bigger context, and if you really think about sort of all of the applications that are around us and that we're using every single day, the API is sort of what can tie these services together. Okay, it's kind of the language in which each of these services can now communicate with each other. And it also sets the rules for how each of these services or applications can interact with each other. Okay, so that's kind of API 101 for you guys. And this is actually a trend, okay, and some folks are calling it the composable enterprise. And basically what that means is that developers don't have to reinvent the wheel on every feature. Okay, they can simply source it from an API. So services like IdeaScale and others, that's why it's so important now to have an API, and maybe more importantly, a well-documented API so that developers know how to use it. Okay, so what does this all mean for IdeaScale, which is why we're on the call today? So you have an IdeaScale community. Okay, you're getting a lot of participation in the form of ideas and comments and votes. Let's say you have close to 2,000 ideas or 10,000 comments. That's a lot of data. Okay, so the question quickly becomes, what can you do with that data? Well, of course, the easiest thing to do would be to simply export it and save it, which is great for backing up your data or saving it. And it's easy to do, but it's not very feasible to do anything with that data, once it's in an Excel spreadsheet. It's just a lot of cells. You could also use IdeaScale's pre-made widgets, which work great because IdeaScale actually provides code that you can simply copy and paste into other web pages, and it will sort of produce this really nice looking. We actually have several widgets which will share your IdeaScale data into these other web pages. Okay, so this might be good enough for you if this is all that you're looking to really do, but in terms of integrating with some of these other services, or really customizing the IdeaScale experience, this may not be good enough. And so that's where the IdeaScale API comes into play. So right now you could go to IdeaScale's support homepage and find IdeaScale's documentation about our API, and essentially all of the various data calls that a developer can use to push your IdeaScale data in the form of ideas, comments, tags, member data into other environments. Okay, and at the same time, you can make it so that the other environments can actually push data back into your IdeaScale. So what does that actually mean? Well, here's 3 examples. Okay, one is you could use the API to create or optimize a mobile experience for your IdeaScale community. You could also change the way that your community presents information, or as I mentioned before, customize it to display, to the same branding of your company or your agency. And then finally, you may have heard of what's called data visualization. Okay, and this is where you can use an IdeaScale API to take your data and actually put it into other formats or applications which can help others see it in new ways or play with it in new ways. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is actually briefly share 5 examples that I've seen from IdeaScale customers using the IdeaScale API. And of course, afterwards we can take questions. If you have any questions about anything, there will be time afterwards. So NBC, okay, they're a customer of IdeaScale, and they use IdeaScale to collect ideas for news coverage in a practice that's now called citizen journalism. If anyone on the webinar is an NBC News fan, you've probably seen this before. And what they did is using IdeaScale's API, they actually took the entire IdeaScale community experience and made it live essentially within a widget. Okay, as you can see here in the screenshot. And what they did then is NBC News put this widget on every single, or made it load on every single NBC News page. So if you were to go to NBC News right now, you would see that at the bottom of the page. And then, of course, users could interact in the same way that they do in your IdeaScale community, but within this NBC News context. Okay, and that works really well for them. So a couple examples then about using the API to change the presentation of your community. If anyone on the webinar is a gamer, you're probably familiar with EA Sports, and you may even be familiar with what they call their Game Changers community. So basically, it's a pre-existing community that they invite their most avid fans into, okay, and engage with these fans on multiple levels. Well, they use IdeaScale as part of this experience to collect ideas from this community for new games or new features within games. The important piece to this case study is that they used the IdeaScale API to actually integrate the IdeaScale experience directly into their existing community. Okay, so if you were a member of Game Changers, you would simply log into this pre-existing community and then see kind of the IdeaScale experience right there. You wouldn't even really know that it was IdeaScale necessarily. Kind of to the same effect, another one of our customers, Cerebral Palsy Alliance, did the same thing in terms of integrating the IdeaScale experience into their existing web page. But they did something slightly different that I wanted to share, and that is on their homepage, they actually used the API to call real-time data and presented that kind of in a very interesting way for users to see. I don't have an example of it here, unfortunately, but where you would see it is kind of at the bottom of the page. They would kind of show like the latest ideas, or maybe the idea that just got the latest vote. Okay, and this would be kind of in real time. It would be moving almost in the form of a ticker. Okay, so that was really engaging from the standpoint of users would come into the homepage and they would see right away that, you know, there was activity. And as a result, it increased engagement. People would then go into the idea, you know, part of this and then participate by submitting their idea. Another interesting piece to this story, which by the way, we have a case study up online on our resources page, not only for this, but also the EA Sports example that I just talked about. You can find that there. What's interesting about this is the customer created a custom functionality allowing users to volunteer to invent ideas. So what I mean by that is if you were to go into their community and submit an idea, okay, and it's in there and then you're voting, there's now another option to actually click that you actually want to take that idea from, you know, conception to reality. And in fact, a nice little story came out of this. Someone went in there and posted an idea that was from an area where he didn't actually have regular access to power, and yet he was in a wheelchair. And so his idea was to somehow create a solar-powered wheelchair. Okay, so this is one of the ideas that were submitted in this community. Well, a team of students from University of Virginia saw that, and using this new functionality to sort of say, hey, I want to invent that, they actually created this chair for this person that submitted this idea in another part of the world. And that's just a fascinating story. And again, if you want to learn more about it, we have it in a case study which you can find on our resources page. So just two more brief examples to share, and this is where we get into some of the data sharing elements to the API. IdeaScale is partnered with Idealytics, which is a plugin, okay, that redisplays IdeaScale data in an interactive format. So essentially, it's an application which you can download from the App Store, and you would load in your community, your IdeaScale community, and then have new options of sort of seeing the data and playing with it with your fingers, kind of in a really interesting and unique way. So if you're looking, again, for ways to sort of share or let others play with your data, especially with regard to mobile, where people can use their fingers and whatnot or their voice. This is a good example of how you could use the IdeaScale API to build something like that. And my final example for today comes from a research project from Italy, actually, a group of, or a team of PhD candidates who are studying the difference between online versus offline engagement. And so what they did is they created an IdeaScale community, which of course is online, and in using the API, they created an offline version of that community. And so what I mean by that is they wanted a way for citizens to walk by something, sort of a screen that projected what was going on in their IdeaScale community, but in a way that made them, allowed them to participate sort of in person, using sort of a touch screen and a mouse. And they the graphic here really doesn't do too much justice, but essentially they were able to use the IdeaScale API to communicate back and forth with what was happening with this on-site public display. So people were walking by the display, participating, right, in the IdeaScale. That data was being fed back into IdeaScale, where users that were using their computers would then also see it and could interact with it as well. So that actually was a pretty fascinating use case. I know that they are continuing to expand on that research, and we actually just did another webinar with these folks, and that's available as well, I believe, from our resources page. If not, you're welcome to contact us, and we can share that link with you. Okay, so I hope that after this now you have a better idea of what an API is and specifically how you might be able to use the IdeaScale API. So now the question is, how will you use the IdeaScale API? And we look forward to hearing some of your stories or helping you out on your mission. So with that, Jessica, I'm pretty much wrapped up. Are there any questions?
Um, yeah, we've got a couple questions in here. Um, I'm not sure if this is something for you or for one of our tech folks on the line, but one of the questions was, do you have any examples of someone not just reading the API, but writing to IdeaScale's API? Is Christoph, do you think you could answer that for us?
Jessica, I think I could take that.
Oh, you've got it. Okay, great.
Yeah, so I think that the best example that comes to mind, again, is this Agora 2.0 project, because they used IdeaScale's API to deliver the data that was populating, online to this on-site public display. And then as folks were participating, in person, that data then, using our API, would take the data and put it back into the IdeaScale community. So it was going both ways. Hopefully that helps. I mean, if whoever had that question, if you need anything more, if you want to talk about it in more technical terms, we're happy to set up a call afterwards.
Great. Yeah. And that was one of the questions too, is how did Agora 2.0 work in an offline context? So was it basically it would like resynchronize that data afterwards?
Well, I don't know if it was necessarily a function of resynchronization, because with the API, it happens in real time. Okay, so if you go through their case study, I mean, it was kind of a basic public display. What it looked like, it was just a computer monitor in a public area. And so as folks were walking by, they would see the ideas that were already posted. And using a mouse, they could either click I agree, I disagree, or next idea. And so, it was just basic voting. And so if they clicked agree, then that using the API call would tell IdeaScale that idea got a vote in real time.
Excellent. Um, are there any other questions? There's not a whole lot popping up here. Josh, you did such a great job explaining everything.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I'm not the most technical person in the world, so believe me, I had to learn a little bit about what this API thing was all about as well. But the thing is, the more that I dive into it, the more that I see the application, especially with IdeaScale, because if you have the basics, down to create a successful, engaging community, then the problem of what do you do with this data, uh, it comes up pretty quickly. So I think the API and the possibilities of doing things with that data or integrating with other platforms such as SharePoint or Yammer, for example, I think that becomes pretty valuable.
All right, well, great. I'm being reminded here that if you want to check out our knowledge base, it has information about our API and that has more documentation. Um, if there are any other questions, yeah, feel free to follow up with us here. Um, anything else you want to add, Josh?
I don't think so, Jessica. Thank you again for everyone joining today. And again, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to myself. My email is at the bottom there. It's josh@ideascale.com. Again, we're looking for ideas and customers that want to use the IdeaScale API. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you, or you might have a programmer uh, that's interested in maybe using our API, definitely reach out to us and give us a heads up, and we'd love to work with you on that.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks, Josh. Bye.